Today we welcome Steffen Kampeter at AICGS. He is the State Secretary, Parliamentarian State Secretary of the German Finance Ministry, which in other words means that you are the Deputy of Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble, right? Welcome to AICGS.
Glad to be here.
We are meeting during these days because the IMF and the World Bank hold their annual meetings in Washington. For the first time we have the impression that Europe is not at the forefront. There's not the usual criticism, the usual alarm that has accompanied those meetings in the past. What's your assessment about where Europe is today?
Actually, it is not just because the American situation is challenging. It's just because Europe made progress. If you look on the program countries where we invested solidarity in exchange for solidity, and compared what was state of the art, let's say 6 or 12 months ago, we now see that they made really good progress. And even in the IMF, we have positive contribution to the progress and an analysis to the progress in Greece and any other countries. And this is very much regarded not just only by politics, but by the capital markets as well. That does not mean that we shall stop now in reforming Europe, bringing competitiveness ahead and stay on the fiscal, conservative and balanced course. But this means that we now gain profit from the activities over the last 2.5 years we made in Europe.
Some say this is also the result of a slightly different look on what is happening in the rest of the world. The whole tapering discussion has caused withdrawals, capital outflows from emerging markets, and suddenly some investors are seeing that there are weaknesses there as well. So Europe doesn't look that bad anymore in comparison to others.
No, I would disagree with you with the analysis you just offered us. I would say what is right. Europe has made progress. We've done our job. What is right as well, but this does not help also, it doesn't make the game different, is that the emerging markets do not perform as good as what was predicted, let's say, 1 year ago. The conclusion for me is that everybody has to do his homework. Homework is key in this very moment. That means that structural reforms we made in many of the European countries now are on the top of the agenda of, for example, the emerging countries as well. This is just a simple conclusion. It shall not be a blame game. We are better and you are worse. It shall be a call for action and a call for ongoing structural reforms. This is the conclusion I draw from the meetings.
Mm-hmm. It's clear that central banks have played a massive role, both in Europe and in the US, in stabilizing the situation. Up until a very short time ago, the promise to do whatever it takes has clearly stabilized the situation in Europe. The European Central Bank has basically bought time for European politicians to tackle some of the underlying issues that still need to be resolved. There's been the sense in 2013 that Europe needed to wait for the German political calendar to actually take place, to wait for the outcome of the German elections. We are still waiting for a new German government. The coalition talks or potential coalition talks haven't started yet. Do you think, looking ahead, that the end of 2013, but particularly 2014, will be a year where politicians and political leadership in Europe will be back at the forefront rather than central banks?
Everybody has to do his job, and as a fiscal policy maker, I respect the independency of the decisions of the monetary policy makers, and I very much regard the action the ECB has took to stabilize the situation and to what they say to let the transmission mechanisms for monetary policy let better work. What we've done on the fiscal front is rebalancing our budgets and focusing on structural reforms. And the more we do our job, it is easier for the monetary policy to make to come back. This is just the basic. To your argument whether European politics has stopped because of Merkel re-election.
Let's say slowed down.
Wolfgang Schäuble is here on the IMF meeting. The clear message of the German delegation is there are elections. Merkel is re-elected. We are still on track, and we contribute to European and global policy progress. That we have not got fixed everything has nothing to do with the German election. If you take the example of the banking union, it has something to do with complicated issues, and that there are different interests on that one. I feel that the debate of slowing down the process as a type of accusation against democracy or against that Germany has an election which is quite democratic has something to do with the perception, will the policy change or not? Mm-hmm. My clear message is this election has shown no policy change from German government.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the banking union, which is clearly looming large in the agenda 2014, if you will, because some of important decisions need to be made. The European Central Bank at the end of 2014 will finally become the single supervisor, and heads of government, European Council needs to decide on the shape and form of a possible resolution mechanism. Where do you think the discussion is going?
The direction of the discussion is quite clear. More stability in the financial system with step one, clear supervision on a single rule-based book. And secondly, we need some backstop mechanism and transparency in the balance sheet. This is underway. It is not as easy as some have predicted. For example, those who said that the single supervisor mechanism will start in 2013 have to realize that building up a European effective and credible supervisor is a more complex thing than just opening some offices. On the issue of the backstop mechanism, we have to see that we have different interests in Germany. The legacy question is very controversial. How shall the European taxpayer get into risk for old liabilities which lie back 10 or 20 years? And then we have the difference between those who think that having decided not to have a transfer union, step two of a banking union can be a substitute for a transfer union. The banking union is not something to transfer money from so-called rich country to the periphery. The banking union is an instrument to stabilize the financial markets, to give credibility to a foreign investor, to a participant, to a counterpart of the European Bank, that our system is stable. It is not a substitute for the wish of some in Europe transferring money from one country to another. This shall be made quite clear in the debate that the focus of the banking union is stability and credibility, but not transfer between countries.
Mm-hmm. And in order to achieve that, and keeping in mind that the primary drive behind establishing, one of the main drivers behind establishing a banking union is the fact that the European Council decided to try to cut the vicious link between banks and their sovereigns. Yeah. If there is no common backstop, if there is no form of transfer between different taxpayers or into a pool, into a sort of common pool, how do you actually cut this link? How do you avoid the negative feedback loop between banks and their sovereigns?
I do not share your prediction that there will be not a common backstop. For the first and easiest and fastest to get is a network of national backstop mechanism with same quality standards. And we have other instruments working, like the ESM, where the debate of the direct banking recapitulation is underway. We have to decide that. So it is not that we don't have backstop mechanisms which are effective and credible in Europe at the moment. The question is, do we have the legal basis to form a European agency as a backstop mechanism? And there the German standpoint is quite clear. Our national constitution will not allow us just to easily transfer sovereign rights and the right to deliver money to European institutions without changes in the treaty. At least our constitutional court is to be expected to give us the red card and stop action there. And what would that mean for the credibility of the banking union? That there is a risk of constitutional challenges. Many market participants know more about German constitutional courts than they have ever learned 100 years before, because if you follow the debate on the ESM, credible banking union means credible without constitutional risk in any of the participating country. That's a clear statement.
You mentioned the fact that the ESM is already there and is a possible backstop in the short term, at least. But then, of course, if you need to change the treaties in order to establish a single resolution mechanism with a single resolution fund, which is filled mainly by, as I understand it, bank levies. I mean, the banks will basically fill the spot, this pot of money over time. How pressing is the need to get at least the legal architecture in place so that this money can actually flow over the course of the next years into this pool of money?
The European Central Bank will look into the balance sheet. They call it asset quality review. If we have fixed that, we will have a clear understanding how much capital is additionally needed in the European banking system, where do we have the problems, or where do we have the stronger parts. And this is the basis for the debate. We haven't decided yet to enlarge the capability of the ESM for direct banking recapitalization, and haven't decided yet to do so. But there is a political debate, and we have only a rough idea how much money we would probably need to make the system stable. My preferable option is that the markets deliver additional capital to the European Bank and not the taxpayer. This is the usual way we should do it, and the debate seems to be a bit too focused on that recapitalizing bank is a taxpayer's duty. I would say just the opposite. It should be the exception. And only in case of emergency that you call for a national or European budget to fulfill the duties of market participant to properly capitalize their financial institutions.
So this is zooming out from the banking union to the wider European Union. Where do you see the union 5 years from now?
There will be no final point of the European integration ever. It is work in progress. We have kept with the European Union the most successful peacekeeping progress on the ground of the European continent ever. I hear that there's much criticism about European bureaucrats, and I share this criticism partially. And probably the future development will be that the deepening of the integration will be one step, and the reassurance whether a political question can be solved in Brussels or in the national interest has to be more sensibly discussed. So some say probably we need more Europe and less Brussels. This may give us a hint in the political debate about the forward integration on the one hand, and the question how much subsidiarity, keeping back authorities, policy making to the national authorities back, and to combine it, that the European integration is something where we have, in combination with national interests, those politic fields which can be effectively solved, addressed with international cooperation within the European institution.
So, but you talk about international cooperation within the European Union. Are we going to have a more sort of intergovernmental approach to things, or more integration?
There is a debate between whether the community method or the intergovernmental method is key and the premium way for European integration. I wouldn't say see this as a contradiction. In many ways, intergovernmental agreements are faster, and if you are under fire or in trouble, you probably will choose the intergovernmental method. But that does not mean that it is an exclusion of the community method to change the treaties. I just stated before that as see for the banking union, if you want to elaborately, like with the European institution, treaty changes are necessary, and I would recommend to do so. This is how I see it. It is not an opposition, it is an instrumental alternative and timely, probably, intergovernmental cooperation and action will stand before the community method, treaty changes and deepening the integration.
Final word on Germany. We are about to witness the official beginning of coalition talks. The Chancellor basically needs to make a choice. Who are we going to engage with? What's your prediction? I mean, you've been here in the US for a few days, and things are moving fast in Germany. What do you think is happening in Berlin?
My prediction is we keep a strong Merkel-free government.
Who would be the preferred ally?
Actually,
your preference.
The preferred ally of the German population is Chancellor Merkel. They have clearly voted her into a third term. The rest is politics, but the message to Europe and the message to the United States is Merkel will stay in office, and the German politics toward the United States will stay on course, and we will be a closer ally for European integration, where we say solidarity and solidity is key.
I'll try it in a different way then. What do you think are the advantages and disadvantages of a coalition of Merkel, of the CDU, CSU, with the Social Democrats, or with the Greens?
Both options have their upsides and their downsides. The option of a grand coalition is that we have a professional partner who has a clear understanding that grand coalition is an extraordinary thing, and the perception of both partners probably will be for a 4-year term. This is quite clear. And the preferable option, if we talk with the Greens, is that this is something more innovative. We can go on a newer path. And it's an enlargement of our strategic option as Christian Democrats for coalition. Both options have the common preference that in the general field of politics, Germany will be a stable partner and stable contributor to European and global politics, because I don't see any big differences whether we have a grand coalition or a black-green coalition in Germany to the international affairs so far as we talked about in this interview.
Okay. When will we have the new government?
Sooner than some predicted. I think in November, the next week, we will see clearly whom we start coalition talk. They will be decided by both by both partners. And then we see probably in November a fixing of the details.
Steffen Kampeter, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.